All right, so I do want to clarify that things did get a little heated last episode, and I want to say that there just are never any hard feelings, okay? Frank and I disagree all the time. We're both equally as loud, and sometimes we clash. So I want to let everybody know that I did not kick Frank off the show. He's here, he's back again. And if I kicked Frank off the show every time I out debate him or embarrass him, he would have been gone by episode 1. So. And in fact, Frank did text me after the show and he said, you're always right and I'm too old to understand. So take that as you will. Mets Weekly Podcast number 56, Mets Phillies series from London, live right now on YouTube and on X. Let's get this one started. Roll that sweet, sweet intro. All right. Well, you guys know what I'm going to say, but I got to do it every single time. As for our usual house cleaning, I want to remind everybody to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel if you have not already for this very podcast that is now recorded live every Sunday and Thursday following every single series of games, like we say, no matter how bad the team is. For those of you who are watching on playback and you want to join the live conversation in the live chat, make sure to turn on those post notifications to not miss every single time we go live for one of the episodes. For those of you who are in the live chat right now, and I just want to let you guys know that we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns. And if you feel like you're being ignored, you are not being ignored. They are being starred throughout the show, and we will try to pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going throughout the stream. Also, make sure to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok, which mainly features Frank's instant reactions after every single Mets game, titled The Mets Frankly Postgame. And also for all of our audio listeners, I made sure to put this information above our heads, but make sure to follow us on all your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of these episodes. If you can't watch us live or watch us visually, they go up at 9 a.m. on Mondays and Thursdays. Actually, it's Mondays and Fridays. That's a typo. But
we go back in time to post them after they happen.
We go back in time, whatever. But other than that, I think we'll get into everything that has been going on. And it actually has only been 2 games since the last time that we have spoken on this podcast. And it was 2 big celebratory games because we got to, expand the game a little bit to another nation, another country. We've got a nice little themed background of, the Great Britain flag. We're in the UK this week. For Mets Phillies. And I think, it was present. If you were there, it probably was presented a little bit better. But watching on TV, more or less, let's just say that.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically using a basketball out there with the way the ball hops around. I mean, I remember last time I saw Jeff McNeil hit a bloop that bounced over a center fielder's head. I mean, and then even the chopper, Mark Vientos, that was like a basketball dribbling up the third base line. So the field conditions are obviously not ideal. I mean, David Dahl's home runs broke ESPN's projections and StatCasts and all that stuff just because the material, just everything, just the conditions of the field are very bizarre. And these were 2 very crazy games, but it felt like you said, even though it was a 2-game series, it felt like it was a 4-game series just because there was so much going on, such a mix of emotions where it's like you feel good, you don't feel good, feel good, and it's like that's constant roller coaster. But able to come in and split against the team that going into today, the best record in baseball. So just being able to kind of be semi-competitive with them, obviously an arch rival of yours, I think that was encouraging. There were some things that were not good that we're going to get into shortly, but it's nothing that surprised us. I'd say that's kind of the main thing is that some of the things that we've been seeing lately, we saw some of that happen again, both good and bad. So at least we're kind of getting more and more of a sense as far as like, all right, what's going right, what isn't going right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's pretty much same old as of right now of what we have seen going on throughout the year. But, I think that, what we'll be talking about today, we'll obviously talk about some like trends that have been going throughout the entire season. But, I think that it really shows, and even though they did snuff out a win here, it really does show how far away these two teams really are. And I'd say that the first impression that I got was the Mets did not hit a single home run in this entire series. I understand it was only 2 games, but 18 innings in a hitter-friendly park, not as compared to when they did this last time, but, in a hitter-friendly park, you really would expect a lot more extra base hits from this team, even though they don't necessarily rely on that as much as they do. It's just probably the best way to keep pace with a team like this and kind of prioritize a little bit more power. But, at the end of the day, we all know how difficult that is for the Mets to do that consistently. We've said this time and time again. Now, obviously, I just want to give a little bit of a rundown of these 2 games because I think that a lot of people, to be honest, they probably were not able to wake up as early, or maybe they woke up late. I mean, there's a lot of Mets fans around the world. For me, I missed a little bit of the game today. I was just very off of the sleep schedule. So, I got to see, the meat of the game. But at the beginning, I did not get to see, whatever crazy opening ceremony there was. But other than that, let's get to the rundown here. Obviously, the first game, Sean Manaea did not pitch well on June 8th. The first game of the 2 did not pitch well, did not go deep into the game, and the bullpen pretty much had to take over from there, and they got into a very early hole in the 4th inning. You had a good game from Lindor. Alonso had a couple of hits. You had a sac fly by Martinez. Iglesias continued to contribute. Terrens continued to contribute. Nimmo, who's been struggling recently, but he got to contribute a hit as well. And, overall, it's basically just the same story as to where something doesn't go right, another thing is going to go wrong. And the Mets really just could not really hold them off in that first game. But in the second game, it was a little bit better, but the same story with the starting pitching. Jose Quintana just could not get through the 4th inning. Only threw 69 pitches, but he just did not have his A stuff whatsoever. It's been a constant trend for him this year. So other than that, the Mets offense did show up in the timely hitting that we all know and love and seem to see at a premium. We saw an RBI double from Nimmo early in the game, and also in that 6th inning, 2-run single to tie the game from JDM. But then you also had a game-tying RBI single in the top of the 9th. A bases loaded hit by pitch gave the Mets the lead. And then the bullpen pretty much took over from there. They gave up 2 earned runs in that. That's a typo right there. Typos happen. I apologize, guys. But the bullpen did come to the rescue, and the Mets were able to get a split. And, of course, that highlight play at the end of Luis Terrens stepping on home plate on a swinging bunt from Castellanos. And he just full on put the spotlight on him, and to be honest, I got a little scared, not gonna lie. I was expecting that throw to go into right field, but then I realized that Omar Narvaez was DFA'd last week, so probably that wouldn't have happened. But I do want to say is, before we get into everything, I do want to say that obviously we were not blessed with the best broadcasting crew for either of these games, whether it was Fox or ESPN. But I will say the call
the London is much better. Oh, yeah.
The London one at the end of the game was legendary. And I'm going to play that right here because I feel like anybody who hasn't heard it, they really do need to hear it. For those of you who are listening or watching, I'm just going to play it right here because it was electric.
And Castellanos' bat explodes, and they're going to get the runner at home. They're going to get the double play to win the game. What an end! The shattered bat. The runner out out at home plate, and the ball fired into the glove of the first baseman, Pete Alonso, and the New York Mets somehow withstand the Phillies rally, and they win Game 2 in London 6-5, 17 hits. What drama, what a game, what a finish.
I mean, that's a good call. I mean, I think that's a good. I don't know this announcer personally. I don't know much about what he does, but all I can say is that's a pretty good call to end off a game. Let's just say that was good precipitation. Yeah. What?
It felt like a clinching kind of call, like we just had definitely. A huge win.
Oh yeah, it was great. I think the energy was there. A lot better than, anything that Michael Kay does or anything that you get from the Fox, which I forget who is even commentating that, but it was definitely some awesome energy. It was great to hear that call because it was good as compared to, what we're usually stuck with. I don't know if it would have been like different if we got it in like a Southern accent, but because that would be pure Merca. But I mean, we're in England, but he was a rugby announcer. Apparently, that's what we're hearing from Caution High Waves Ahead. Thank you for that. And I'm sure he gives you a lot of energy because rugby, I'm sure can have some exciting moments in it. But other than that, in this series, I obviously want to start off with the weakness. Only getting, what is it, 8 innings out of your starters?
Innings out of the starters,
yeah. Both of them knocked out at the same. I think that, Manaea, it happens with the high pitch count. It will happen. But I'm just going to say, just like, we're 11 minutes in. We're not very far in, but I'm going to say that I think that it's coming very, very close as to where we see that Jose Quintana cannot be part of this rotation anymore. I think that, and whether you agree or not, whether you trust him or not, I just think that, yes, he's a veteran guy. He's been out there for a long time. He knows what he's doing, but he just doesn't have it. Every single time, he just does not have it. And when you see a guy sweat through throwing low 90s junk,
yeah, exactly.
It's really, really hard to say that, like, oh yeah, next time he's gonna get it. It's just, I think that his days are they're numbered now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the advanced numbers say, but I've been saying it pretty much since the season started. But what I see is just a guy that, like we say, he talks about like control command. Like that's what Quintana has, because he doesn't have high velocity. He doesn't have wipeout stuff. And now that he's walking batters as much as he just has nothing going for him. Like he's just not doing anything particularly well. He's fooling
the top
anybody.
Nibbler on this staff.
Yeah,
he is the top nibbler.
And it's a thing where his stuff doesn't even translate to the bullpen. Like he's basically useless at this point. I mean, he just found himself in a situation where he cannot miss bats. And against this Phillies lineup, if you can't miss bats, they're going to punish you. And, that's exactly what happened. So you can't get away with it. I mean, you're just going to end up with these little hit parades, like these blow-up innings where he just can't get out of it. And it's like not the first, second, third, fourth, whatever. And it's just, you can't do that when you have other guys in the rotation already doing that from time to time. Like in this case, like you said, Manaea was the victim where he only goes a few innings. Like you just got to have at least one guy who could give you some length, whether they throw, 5 shutout innings, 6 shutout innings, whatever, as long as they could get out of innings, at least they could just do some good things to be able to escape jams. Then you could actually get through games. I mean, Zach Wheeler, before he became the elite pitcher he did with the Phillies, you'd see all the time where he had an inning where he gave up 3 runs, 4 runs, but he still went 6 innings. He was always able to get out of it, able to work into the game. Quintana can't do that. And I just feel that, I think Jose Butto has just not gotten a fair shot this year. I feel like for the most part, he was giving them length. He was having good starts. He has 1 or 2 bad starts, and the guy's gone. Meanwhile, Quintana has been awful basically all year. He may have had 1 or 2 good starts, but all in all, I mean, this is most of the time the result that we're seeing.
Not the consistency that you usually see from
he's not himself. I mean, that's exactly what Darren said before the show. I mean, he's just not the guy that we expected. And this team is missing their Chris Bassett type of role, even, their Marcus Stroman kind of guy, like that innings eater. I just feel like, and it doesn't have to be an ace. I mean, that's the thing is that, we're not asking for the world here, but just someone who could provide length. It just allows you to manage a game totally differently because, the way Mendoza had to manage today, while I don't agree with how he did it, it was a much harder game to manage because of what happened the previous day. And again, you just cannot have that happening multiple times in a short time frame. It is just really puts you in an impossible spot. They're fortunate that they got away with it this time, but we've seen in previous games where it's like the starter didn't go enough, the bullpen gets overworked, and now they're in a bit of a predicament. And they're kind of lucky that they are here in London, where it's like, okay, you had these 2 games where your bullpen got totally taxed. Now you have these off days. That doesn't usually happen. Like when you're in the US, you get very few off days. So, the fact that they have this like built-in off days with the travel kind of allows them to really tax the bullpen in these games. But this is not a kind of game plan you could do game in, game out. It's just not going to work.
I mean, they played 9 innings yesterday and they were already taxed to like non-belief. I mean, yes, you probably could have had back-to-back days, obviously, because, you have the off days in between them. But, I mean, this bullpen, we all know, is bleeding right now. Obviously, Edwin will be back eventually, but we don't know what the effectiveness is going to be. Look, I will say the 2 rehab outings that he's had, he has looked really, really good. He looks a lot better. Slider looks a lot crispy. Looks a little bit more explosive out of his hand, so is his fastball. So he looks better, but obviously these are against high A hitters. You don't know. So, I mean, this bullpen's just really, really bleeding, but hats off to them, to be honest, because they held their own fairly in this series. Because I will say is that, the bullpen obviously has really been bleeding recently, and they're really out of a lot of options. And, the starters don't give you distance sometimes. They have their usual blowups because they're not as dominant as they said top flight guys that we're used to having. But I think that, it's really, really hard for me. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm just shilling Mendoza, and it's really, really hard for me to go after any Mendoza decisions when your starter goes 3 2/3. It's really, really hard to piece that together.
I understand.
No matter what.
I understand, but I don't agree with the Reed Garrett managing.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
You can't do, for a guy who is not your traditional long reliever, multiple up downs plus. Well, it had to be almost a half hour at the top of the 9th inning.
I think they were really counting on that off day for Reed Garrett tomorrow.
But regardless, it's not even that. It's not even
no.
that. I'm more so concerned about the effectiveness in the moment. I just think that a guy who already has gone an inning and a third with an up down, 2 up downs, and has a long top of the 9th, that's a lot of factors for an inexperienced guy. Just be like, okay, now go close the Phillies in the 9th inning. And and the way I see it is that like the babying of Drew Smith is unacceptable. Like the way it's like he could only be used.
Well, we got to save our best bullets. Come on.
Yeah. Well, no, it's like he could only be used in this kind of spot. And it's like, if you have to force Reed Garrett to do all of that to avoid using Drew Smith, then Drew Smith shouldn't be here. I mean, that's kind of the way it works, is that if you can't count on these guys.
It's been the case for a while.
Yeah, but yet he's the longest tenured pitcher on the staff. He's been here since 2018. I mean, so I don't get that. I mean, whether that's Mendoza, Stearns, whoever, like, if the guy has been here for, like, if you've been here for a long time, it should be because you're so good that we want to retain you. And if it has to be that, like, it's an absolute emergency, is like, that's when we go to Drew Smith, then, I mean, I just don't understand that process of, like, you didn't use him yesterday. You had Danny Young work 2 days in a row. Like, it's just like the guys that they're counting on compared to who, like, based off tenure, who should be counted on. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And it's like we've talked about all the time. If you're not here to do the job, get out. You're gone. Bring in someone else, because at this point, despite Nunez giving up the home run, these 2 young guys, Nunez and Young, are the 2 best relievers on the team right now. And they're the 2 guys who we weren't talking about in spring training. We weren't talking about in the offseason. I mean, these are the guys that just came up from the minors because of the major league guys getting hurt and throwing their gloves into the crowd. So, I mean, I'm sure that there's got to be another young piece that maybe is a little more reliable than Drew Smith if the Mets have that little confidence in him. Because I just don't think that doing this to Reed Garrett is not only bad in the short term, but like you said, it's even worse in the long term. So I just think that, there's no scenario where decisions like this make sense with inexperienced pitchers. Like if this was Seth Lugo, vintage Lugo, I'm like, okay, he could probably handle this kind of scenario. But Reed Garrett's never been in that situation where he's waiting 30 minutes in the ninth inning. Like I just think that it was just not proper managing.
Oh no, they were walking a huge tightrope there, and they got away with it. They 100% got away with it, and there was a lot of things that happened in that game that they ended up with the higher score than their opponent, but there's a lot of things that are not going to sustain well against teams like this, because just because it happens once doesn't mean that it's going to continue to happen again. And I think that.
What's interesting is that in that broadcast, that London broadcast in particular, they talked about how, it was a broken bat from Castellanos. And it's like, if that ball goes just like a little further, it's a much harder play for Torrens to step on home plate. So it's like you said, it's literally a tightrope when you talk about a game of inches.
Yeah.
Like the ball rolled just enough into fair territory where Torrens could get it, step on the bag, fire. That ball rolls a little further. That play is much tougher. You don't turn it, and you have a totally different game on your hands. It's a break of a bat. Like that's a less than 10% chance of happening.
We've seen different types of contact against Drew Smith in the past before, so it's not like that's going to just happen every single time. Because if he misses a pitch, it's probably going to find the barrel of the bat. But I'm just what I'm saying is that it's really, really hard for them to piece together anything of bullpen management or really justify anything that goes on, because it's just so peculiar right now. It's really, really hard as to where, it's really hard to judge what's going on with Mendoza, because the starters are literally failing them every goddamn game. And it's like, yes, I understand good managers can make those types of decisions, but when you're putting a first-year manager under this type of heat to piece together 5 innings of relief with his starter the previous day doing the same length, it's so hard for me to judge what he's doing, because he's just trying to piece things together. I mean, they are bleeding right now.
Well, here's the other guy that I think deserves even more blame than Mendoza. That's Jeremy Hefner, because in the beginning of the season, Michael Tonkin was honestly one of the worst pitchers I'd ever seen. I mean, that's how bad this guy was. Like, he was coming in and it was like 4 runs instantly. This guy is now locked down for the Yankees. Locked down. He's like a high leverage reliever for them. And it's like, and then Anthony Banda on the Dodgers, he's got a 0 ERA. Like, it's just all these guys that, if the starter's not doing their job, if Reed Garrett's hitting batters or whatever, it's like, where's the pitching coach in all this? Because again, how many times is it that the player doesn't do well in this organization? As soon as they go somewhere else, all of a sudden they're just put all together and they're amazing. I just don't understand. Like, there's got to be some blame to the pitching coach as well, where it's like, Mendoza could try to all these different things, but if the pitching coach is not teaching these guys the right way to approach hitters and getting the most out of them, I mean, that also makes the manager's job more difficult.
I have always had this really sneaking suspicion about Jeremy Hefner, and I've never really talked about it before because obviously it's the results on the field that obviously have just been very mixed with him throughout his entire tenure as a Mets pitching coach. But I've always we always know that there's a possibility that maybe he just doesn't have a feel for the mental game whatsoever. It's possible that he doesn't, because it's not even just the timing of when he goes out to the mound. It just doesn't seem like there's really any connection there as to where he understands what keeps these pitchers from completely melting down, because we have seen it time and time again. The defense fails them. They walk a few batters, and they are just rattled. They can't get the freaking ball over the plate. They throw cookies, and the game just gets completely out of hand. We've seen this constant tradition of these guys like Josh Walker, or these guys all these minor league guys who have never been in these types of situations where sometimes they're brought in the game at a very confusing time, and the Mets are only down 2-1. And you're like, why is he in a 1-run game? And then lead off walk, and then everything just goes to shit. And they don't even give them a chance to even come back from it. And it's really hard when you have like these very holes in your coaching staff. It's really hard for a first-year manager when they don't have other people kind of not really taking care of it or bailing him out, but just like helping him in a way as to where the team is just really, really bleeding in an area due to injuries, due to, throwing your glove into the crowd, or, due to the starting pitchers just really, really not being able to go deep into games. I just think that there really is just no initiative, I think, from Jeremy Hefner. I think that there's knowledge from him, but I just don't think that there's really any initiative where he sees something mentally or he sees something physically that a lot of pitching coaches are able to see by connecting with those pitchers if he works with them as much as they say he does. And I think that, the main reason as to why I see, this team being as taxed as they are, you can look at the numbers. The Mets bullpen has a massive workload this year. Surprisingly, they're only 14th in the majors right now in total innings, the Mets bullpen, which is crazy. But when you look at it, here's how I really know, and I'm not talking about just like physically on the screen when I'm watching. Here's what I see a lot from Mets relievers who are constantly taxed and constantly exhausted. Here's what I see a lot on the mound. That's what I see a lot on the mound, and that says a lot. It's like a picture is worth 1,000 words right there. A video is worth, 1,000 takeaways or whatever. That's what I'm seeing on the mound right there. And it's not just like, okay, coming up with constant conclusions in your head of like, oh, this guy, he's so nervous right now. They are tired. They are taxed. They are nearly dead. They're running on fumes. And it's only June. The first week of June, second week of June. I mean, it's rough. It is a rough experience to labor through 9 innings with this bullpen.
Yeah, and I think too, like the one thing that I always look at too is the guys, like I always talk about Danny Young, but even the games that they don't pitch, a lot of times they could be warming up. And it's like that also. So you can say, oh, well, how could Danny Young be tired? He only has this many innings pitched this week. It's like, okay, but when you talk about the fact that it's like, and that's the thing I think too, it might be more so like appearances, because the fact that you see a guy like Danny Young work multiple days in a row and he's warming up, it's like, I don't know how these young, inexperienced arms over the course of the 162 are able to pace themselves with workloads that they're not familiar with.
I mean, you can say that too, but also Danny Young's 30. He's not young.
But I'm saying
his last name is Young, but he's not
I'm just
young,
saying he's not like an experienced, like high leverage reliever where it is used to like this kind of just kind of usage. I just don't think he's been in that kind of situation before.
And then this is also another point from B. Stearns as well. You can't trust Otto,
which
I don't think you can either.
He's getting paid too much to like not be trusted. You know what I mean? Like he's
getting paid less than he was. But
I know, but again, him, they're just going like on different. Past experience. You know what I mean? Like he's here because of past experience. Where like yes, he had good years with the Mets. But
I think in a vacuum, he's a good pitcher.
But I think that as time goes on. Just look at any sport. As you get closer and closer to 40, the expectations is just not the same.
Yeah, he's an oil and water type of pitcher. When you mix those two together, they completely repel, and everything just busts open. Like it's like a black hole with Adam Ottavino. Like you just don't know when it's gonna actually like attach to him. Like it's floating around because he's just so nerve-wracking to watch. And the problem with Ottavino, and I say this all the time, he's such a low floor pitcher that at his worst it's so goddamn bad. And low floor, high ceiling types of pitchers, those are the types of guys that typically get put in these high leverage situations because they have the stuff to get these strikeouts. But Ottavino, Mr. Uncompetitive pitch after uncompetitive pitch, it's not going to get any better when he, as he continues to get older. But, I think that at one point, it's a long journey with Adam Ottavino. Let's just say that, to get 3 outs for him. You just don't know what you're going to get. He's like a box of chocolates, as we can say.
Yeah, I'm looking at Danny Young's career. So, I mean, he made his major league debut in 2022. So, despite his age 30, as far as major league experience, you're looking at, in 22, he pitched 6 innings total, and 23 pitched 8 innings total. He's right up to 7 innings this year. So, it's like he's never actually pitched a full season. So, I'm just very curious to see kind of how his the rest of his season goes, because he's been great so far. But
the closest thing to a full season he's ever gotten was 56.2 innings in Double-A in 2018 at age 24.
And again, like the expectations, the leverage, the workload, just the usage is totally different.
Yeah, I mean it's really tough when you see a lot of guys come in here, lack of experience, but how they have good stuff, but it's like at the end of the day, usage and effectiveness, they go hand in hand. They always will. So it's obviously like guys can be as effective as they are, unless it's like, that top 1% sinker baller who pitch better when they're tired, the Jared Hughes type, that guy. Yeah. But
he is the one,
the Alex Claudio that we had or something. Who was the other guy? That says he pitched better than Ty. Was it Adam Simber, I think? I don't know. There's other guys.
That was a good one.
The sinker ballers that do better when they're tired, but that's the top 1%, of course. And I think that it's hard to give a workload and inexperience and to keep that effectiveness. It's really hard, especially with relievers that are so finicky. It will always be a house of cards situation. And I think that that's what the Mets are really, really relying on right now. And they have no choice because their starters cannot go deep into games. It's just continued to be a problem. It was a problem last year. It basically killed us. It was basically the dissolve of that great, at one point great 2022 team. You weren't getting volume whatsoever. You were getting no volume from the guys you were expecting to get volume from. And now they bring in some guys who they need to get on a roll. They need to have their stuff right. And sometimes it just blows up in their face. I will say Severino's been better at it. He's definitely gotten us a little bit more volume. Manaya is really, really hit and miss. Quintana's the main guy that I really just have a lot of problems with, because it's not like he's taking us out completely of the game. It's just the fact that he's laboring through 3-4 innings, and does he have the stuff where he can make up for it? Like, there's guys who have the strikeout stuff, but there's sometimes they struggle to get the ball over the plate. With Quintana, if he ain't throwing strikes, he ain't gonna do anything. Like it's possible that like because he doesn't have chaseable stuff whatsoever, so it's possible that if he just continues to throw pitches out of the zone, let's say he throws 60 pitches out of the zone out of 60. No one's going to get out. No one's going to chase. No one's if he continues to throw these uncompetitive pitches, his pitch count's going to be at 75 in the third inning. It's just going to happen. And for some reason, eventually I hope they do make the change, because, in the chat, we have a, in the chat, we have a poll going on right now. If you trust Jose Quintana, 81% of you guys are saying no. So 19% are saying yes. I guess that's maybe like the career ERA people. But 0% are 50-50. So it looks like it's pretty much decided as of right now, because I think we've already established this already with Jose Quintana. We know what he is. We know what type of pitcher he is at his best. We know what pitcher he is at his worst. And we're getting a lot of the worst recent. You don't like his 90 mile? Yeah, Ken, no, I don't. I really, really don't. It's just, pinpoint command is something that he needs, and he's just not getting it whatsoever. All I can say is main takeaways from this series. Anything else you want to add here? I do want to say that I think Tomas Nito's going down to AAA. Whether Terens is healthy or not after that last play, because we don't know. Something may have happened. Garrett Stubbs tried to take him out. But I think that, once Alvarez comes back, Torrens has definitely proved in a very short sample that he's quite a defensive stalwart back there. And, even though like the games haven't been great for our starting pitching, he's been able to bail them out. He's been able to block well. He's been able to throw well. He's a really, really good defensive catcher. And that's the type of guy as to where you want him as your backup, who has those sort of intangibles. And also, like Daniel is saying in the chat, he's only making $100,000. So that's pretty sweet. Let's just say that. That's quite the steal there. And that is a Stearns move. That is not Omar Narvaez was a Billy Hepler move. Kind of gives you a little bit of a difference there. Any other takeaways you got from this series?
I mean, I'm looking at Brett Beatty getting the start today. I thought that was interesting because, they have him up here as the 27th man. And I know we're going to maybe get to him a little later on, but I just don't see it. You know what I mean? Like, Mark Vientos comes in, he hits the chopper, what have you, but, he gets the RBI. I just, the more I watch, especially just Vientos playing well, and even his defense has been better than I expected as far as just being able to make the routine plays. It's just Vientos over Beatty. Like there's really nothing to really talk about anymore. I mean, we've had this conversation so many times, but I just feel like just watching, like, even though Vientos went hitless the first game, but it's like I just feel like this. I know, yeah, exactly. It's just like the sample size. Like he had a nice walk from Vientos, which against Strom, who is like really hard. He has like a 3% walk rate. So to walk against a pitcher like him, and they said he's been absolutely demolishing left-handed pitching, which we know the Mets desperately need for a long time. They've really struggled against left-handers. So I just think that a lot of times Vientos just looking like the overall better fit, better player. And I feel like I just think it's decided at this point. If and that's the thing too, is that like Beatty, he's taking reps at like second base and what have you, and we have it like in our additional stories. But like, what does that even do? You know what I mean? It's like the results have been so similar to Jeff McNeil in a lot of ways, what he's doing offensively, that even if Beatty did become a utility player, it's like, why would you even play him? You know what I mean? Again, it's like he doesn't, it's in a very similar to Jeff as well, where it's like he doesn't have a tool that's a plus. He doesn't have like this amazing glove. He doesn't have an amazing bat. He doesn't have amazing speed. Like, why do you carry him on the roster? I mean, he's not just, it's not like, okay, well, he does this really well. We'll, utilize that and that'll be his role. He doesn't do anything like really well. Meanwhile, Vientos, it's like, okay, I know he has a bat. I know he's got power. And, it's like, there's just a lot more there that I just don't know. Like, the more I see it, I'm like, I just don't see the fit at all. And now he's
taking reps at second base, which is, I mean, to be honest, he's hitting like a second base. Even
Iglesias has outplayed Beatty too. You know what I mean?
He has outplayed Beatty. Yeah,
he's getting multi-hit games just about every time. Defensively, at least he's turning good double plays. I mean, I'll give him that. Those have been very crisp with Lindor up the middle. So I just, again, it's like I kind of have Iglesias too than Beatty. He's been giving me something. He's been getting a lot of hits in a short amount of time. So I'm not seeing much value there. And it's just really frustrating for a guy, like we've talked about a million times, was a top 50 prospect, one of the best third base prospects in all of baseball, first round pick, like go on and on and on. But there's now a few years going on. We just have not seen anything. And there's been improvement defensively, but offensively, there has not been improvement. I mean, it is just like the same old ground ball heavy, there's just nothing there. There's no exact approach, identity at the plate, and it's just very frustrating to watch. So that's definitely something that stands out to me. And then we'll get to Mr. Marte next, because he is just another interesting one. The other thing I didn't like about the Drew Smith situation was, let's say Drew gave up the game, right? Like, let's say it doesn't go well. They put him in
never happened.
They put him in such an awful spot. I think that's like, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Drew Smith, I think you put Drew in 2-run lead, bases empty. That's a pretty favorable situation for a relief pitcher compared to like first and second 1-run game.
Against
go figure it out.
Bryce Harper,
like that's a really, really, like we talk about as like from a managerial perspective, putting your players in the best position to succeed. that's just not it.
I just think they're so taxed that everybody becomes a high leverage reliever at this point. Like that. That's how the situation.
I mean,
is
that's
now.
what's happened. Is, I mean, you've had Diekman being the ninth. I mean, you've had like just about anybody in, Sherman Foley being in big spots. Like, and that's kind of what happens when your closer is down and don't have that set. Like, these are my high leverage guys, game in, game out. Like, there's not that. Like obviously the 2015 Royals with the 7-8-9 combination where it's like, you had those guys like Holland and Davis. I mean, they were just that was their formula and they got it done. They're not in that situation at all where it's just like, who do we have that's available? Okay, it's your turn. Like, go out there. Yeah. Hopefully you can get it done. Like, that's just very tough to kind of navigate like that every day. It just, you're kind of looking around like, okay, who's available today? Like, it's very hard to go in with like a set game plan.
Who's not dead?
Yeah.
Who isn't dead today? Basically, because that's the repercussions. It's constant cause and effect as to where the starters have to give you more volume than that. And yes, they had the exception of they have the rest in between this series, obviously, with them flying to London. But you can't have back-to-back games where your starters go 3 2/3. That can't happen. It just can't. In order to survive in any possibility, it's really hard to win as well that way when you need so many cooks in the kitchen to get a job done in 9 innings. It just can't happen that way. And listen, I think that it's really hard in terms of Brett Beatty because I've really just. It really just doesn't seem competitive. It just doesn't. You just don't really see any sort of promise whatsoever from him in terms of offensively. And he was originally scouted as an offensive guy. Like, he was an offensive first. One of the best quick bats in the draft. I mean, in terms of Vientos, I think he obviously has the upper hand here, no matter what. Like, he's got the job. He's the starting third baseman right now. I will say there are some concerns. Like, I'm not seeing him hit the barrel zone as much as I want to with his type of power that he has. Because the as we can say, like, the sweet spot rate or whatever, like, that is really, really low. Like, that is in bottom 10. That's in like bottom 10 percentiles right now. In the league right now. For those of you who don't know sweet spot, it's basically the combination of line drives and fly balls between 8-degree launch angle and 32-degree launch angle. That's kind of the barrel zone, shall we say. And, obviously you have the exit velocity that brings in the barrel combination. But I think that, there are concerns there with Vientos, but I think that there's just so much better of a foundation with him as compared to Beatty, where it's just it's really just, you're expecting him to get on base at least, and then that's pretty much it. We're not seeing any of the hitting tools that he was scouted to have, being the high expectation that he was. And, Vientos absolutely has his flaws, but, at the end of the day, he's been the one that's performing, and it's been pretty clear so far that if you don't perform, you don't get any free passes. Let's just say that. But other than that, speaking of not performing and speaking of a constant trend that has been going on, I'd say the last 2 seasons, Starling Marte's defense has become a liability, a full-on liability, whether you're talking about statistically or visually. We had another incident that may have been very game impacting, even though it would have been a close game. And the floodgates definitely opened after this entire thing happened. And the problem with it being is that there were 2 outs, and it was a tie game. And even though the Mets only scored 2 runs, and they probably at best would have won 2-1 in that game, it's really, really hard to see a little bloop hit to right field with a catch probability of 95%. And Marte lets it drop in front of him. And listen, like we said earlier, like Frank said at the beginning, it was basically like a basketball type of physics that was going on with this, like, carpet, or like, I don't even know what material this is made. This is in another country. They're crazy. But with how the ball was bouncing, it's really hard to judge it, obviously. But at the same time, we were also getting a lot of excuses from Marte after this game where I couldn't see very well. I couldn't see the ball fairly well. There was a glare or whatever. Marte, you have sunglasses at the top of your head, man. Why don't you use them? Like that would be smart. Like, here's the problem with Starling Marte, okay? And I said this before, and I'm going to say it again. It's either this guy is the most impactful player or best player on the field at the current moment, or he plays the entire game with his head up his ass. There's no in between with Starling Marte. That's what gets very frustrating with him. And particularly with the defense this year, it has been a disaster. And I understand why he is in right field because of his arm strength. But I just feel like you're really cutting out the long man here as to where, yes, his arm belongs in right field, but nothing else belongs in right field where it's more common, more efficient, more frequent when this happens. And I want to show Starling Marte of how he has been defensively, statistically, in a vacuum. Let's just say from these statistics, the Starling liability, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, from the last 2 years, I would say that in a vacuum, arguably, he is the worst defensive right fielder in all of baseball. It's pretty self-explanatory. Yes, he may be in the middle ground with everything else. Among qualified right fielders, there's about like 40 of them. He's been one of the worst in the last 2 years. Obviously, he's getting over 1,100 innings. He was hurt last year. He's been banged up recently. His arm wasn't great last year, which is why it's kind of fluctuated in terms of his arm value in the outfield. We're seeing, negative 13 outs above average. Ultimate zone rating is kind of just everything piled on from run value. It's a little flawed, but it kind of works for outfielders a little bit more because they have a little bit more range. But then you also see at the bottom, 91.6 mile per hour arm strength, which is third among right fielders. Now, obviously, a good arm, it's a good tool to have, obviously. It's one of the run prevention things that Stearns would talk about. But it's really hard for him to use the arm when he's not getting to the ball quick enough. And I think we've talked about this as the full-on conclusion with Starling Marte. It's very possible that his lower half is compromised. Very, very possible, because obviously he's not running things out like he used to be. He's not stealing as many bases as he is. He's not getting quick enough to the ball. He just does not have that jump, that fiery spark that he had 2 years ago. And I think that that's pretty much established here as to where the upper half looks good. Like, he's still serviceable offensively. But the lower half, everything he needs to do with his lower half, it's not there anymore. It's very, very diminished. And it's really hard when you paid Starling Marte to use his arms and his legs to give you value on the field. And that's where it really, really gets sticky in terms of Starling Marte at an age 35 season. Frank, anything? I mean, it's just, and I'm going to add another point to this, but I'll let you say your piece on this, because this has become a liability for the Mets. It's become a big problem, Starling Marte's defense. He's been one of the reasons why this defense has been really bad.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. You hit it spot on, especially at the end where it's like he got paid for everything he does, not
all
just
four limbs.
Yeah, exactly. He got paid because he does like a lot of different things. Because he never, besides stealing bases, he technically never did anything at an elite level. Like, he was never a 30 home run hitter. He was never a 900 OPS hitter. I mean, he was never any of that. His defense was good. His speed was good. And he got, good batting average. So he got on base. So, like, he was doing, like, a lot of different things. And then it just gave overall value, which then leads to the contract. But with what he's giving you right now in the field on the bases, his hitting has been good in the month of June. Like, he's been good the past couple of weeks or so. And it's like, okay, well, why don't you just make him a DH? It's like, well, we can't because we signed JD Martinez. And, so I agree with you where it's like, I wouldn't mind seeing him in left field just to change it up a little bit, just where you can't get burned as much, because it is a problem. I mean, right field is a very tough spot to just have a guy who is like one of the worst and just can't move, doesn't want to move, maybe is like someone mentioned, like B. Stearns, is he afraid to dive? It's a fair critique. I mean, you don't really see him going for it. And I don't, to an extent, I don't blame him, because I can see him breaking his hamstring as soon as he tried it. So it's like
Can you break a
rope.
hamstring? Hold on, sorry, I don't mean to call you out there, but can you break a hamstring? I don't know.
He could get some old man injury that I know. He could pull a hip. I mean, a lot of things could go wrong. But I just think that it's hard to play that way. So I think that they need his bat to stay at this level, because if it doesn't, he's just not providing enough value. Because if he's not hitting at a really high clip, his defense is not bailing you out. Right now, his speed hasn't been bailing you out. And, what really bothers me is, like you talked about, the excuses. I mean, oh my gosh. You were talking about the sun. We're talking about, oh, well, it's where they aligned me defensively. It's like, well, pull up that graphic. And it's like, what about all the other times where you've been like statistically a horrible outfielder? Was it the sun all these other times? Was it the coaches all these other times? You know what I mean? It's like, you're too old. You're getting paid too much to be making these excuses. I don't want to hear it. I really don't want to hear it, Starling. You know what I mean? Like, you don't show me that you care, because I don't see you mad at the coaches, yelling at the coaches, being like, why'd you put me in the wrong spot? I just see Starling Marte just kind of, ooh-de-la-de-da, just, I dropped it. Oh, well. You know what I mean? Like, you'll never see, I say one thing, you'll never see Marte throw his glove in the crowd, because he's just too cool. That doesn't bother him. You'll never see Marte throw his bat down on the ground, unfazed, whether we win or lost, because I can't catch a ball. It doesn't matter. So I just think that, that's just his personality. That's kind of just what he is. He got away with it for a long time because of his speed, because of his athleticism, but it's just a very tough thing to balance. It's like, it's that trade-off and just the overall value. Is he a plus? Is he a guy that, with everything else, do you actually feel like this is productive for the team? Is he providing value? Because it's like, it's a give or take, where it's like, okay, we got the good arm, we're getting some hitting, but then when we're just falling asleep in the outfield, how do we balance that out? So I wouldn't mind at least seeing him in left field for a little bit, see how that goes. You could move Brandon to right field, even though his arm's not great. You paid him to be a center fielder, where you also kind of need
I
a bit
would
of an
put him
arm.
in center field, personally. I would put him in center field, and then I would put Bader in right / Taylor in right. I mean, obviously, it's a big power.
Well,
position,
I mean, that's the other thing I was going to get to. So then DJ Stewart played right field today, and
true,
again,
that could.
Yeah, like the ballpark is
he's
weird.
not great at it, but
no,
he tries.
He's not. Again, the ballpark is weird, like Yuki mentioned, bouncy turf and things like that. But what bothered me was, even though Jeff got the hit, I didn't love the McNeil lefty-lefty matchup. I felt like there were a few occasions where if Starling Marte is swinging me a hot bat, and that's the only thing he's bringing me right now with that contract is a bat, why is he not pinch hitting in the ninth inning? I just, and this is not the second time I noticed this, where they don't go to him as a pinch hitter, and they let Harrison Bader take the ABs, or Tyrone Taylor, whoever else. Like,
hey, Harrison Bader's been great in the high leverage situation. I mean, he is the clutch man of clutch man. I mean, he is the David Freese who got a mention last week.
I did.
In the heat of the moment.
Yes.
But if you were to break down,
but I just think that it's like, if you're paying him this much, but you don't trust him in the big spots to be a pinch hitter, then why is he here? Why is he getting paid all that much if this is his role on the team? I just don't think that really makes sense.
If you were to break down his -8 outs above average this year, obviously it's in the 4 zones, of course, which is in front of you, to your right, to your left, behind you. The lowest rate,
right?
The lowest rate, and it kind of makes sense here. The lowest rate that he has is to his left. Which is his glove side, and that's -4. Behind him is -1, in front of him is -1, and then to his To his right, it is -2. So that kind of, that obviously adds that up for the -8, because that's how math works. But for it's really hard because in terms of the positioning, I don't know where they really have him like catch probability. Yes, it's probability, and it's the odds, of course, but catch probability does go with they do have ballpark factors in them. So if you're going to say that, the turf was too bouncy, or, this is this type of hitting environment or this type of fielding environment is a little bit off, that goes with park factors. So no matter what, 95% of the time that catch is made. And whether you're 35 or not, that can't happen. That just can't happen. And yes, it opened up the floodgates. Minaya didn't pitch well. He did not have a good outing. But in that certain situation, when you have 95% chance to catch something with 2 outs, big hitters coming up, or, runners on base in a tight situation, I mean, where's the awareness? Where is the awareness when you look at it? I mean, it's just really been horrendous with Starling Marte. It's just he doesn't seem to really want to, he just freelances himself out there in right field. And to be honest, I'm really happy that he is hitting this year and he is giving you a lot of value, because that would up his trade value. That would up that's the only thing that's keeping him giving you trade value and maybe possibly not covering 7 million % of his contract, like you had to do with, a 4-year deal such as McCann, or a 4-year deal that you had to do with, who's the other guy? Who's the other 4-year deal they had to cover? Was it Jason Bay or somebody
he had
yeah,
multiple years.
So I think that, sorry for the Jason Bay mention, guys. I apologize for those of you who are watching live or listening. But I think that, at the end of the day, yes, he does have the arm. You also have a good arm from Bader, even though he hasn't really showed it that well this year. I don't want to put Nimmo's noodle arm in right field. I just don't preference that. Nimmo's been healthy enough where I think that he can play a lot of center field. They've definitely preserved that health fairly well. And he's still a good defensive center fielder. He's really developed that way. And in terms of the range of the players, Marte doesn't have it, but in left field, especially with this team that loves to fucking pitch into the shift, away from the shift, they love to give a lot of pitches to pull. Let's just say that Marte probably would benefit a little bit better from left field than right field. He's played left field before. Let's not forget. I mean, didn't he won a Gold Glove as a left fielder, I think, what was it, 10 years ago or something? I just think that given his age, he should be in left field. And a guy like Tyrone Taylor, who has the highest sprint speed on the team, if for those of you who don't know, and can play all 4 positions, he's better suited in right field / center field. Yeah. All 4. Did I say 4 positions?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a catcher too. Did you know that? But it's I think that you need to use that personal flexibility, especially when you want to keep Starling Marte's bat in the lineup that has been productive. And, it's erratic, but it's been productive. You are getting a solid, 760 OPS. Marte had a few hits in this series too.
Yeah, no,
but it was all foreshadowed by that stupid play he made,
Yeah, so right now he's at 280 on the average, 760 on the OPS.
Yeah.
I think OPS 120. And then in the month of June, I believe he's at 400 batting average, OPS over 900. Yeah, so, great. Especially as of late, yes, he's been getting plenty of multi-hit games. It's just a matter of not giving those runs back that you're trying to create. I mean, that's kind of like we talk about with the give or take. It's that's where it really kind of comes in to haunt you. Here you go, Carson. Last 7 days, 500 average, 1,289 OPS. So,
wow! Look,
he's been swinging a hot bat.
He's been hot at the plate, and that's
we just did have the injury scare within the past during the Washington series where he had the little lower half thing, and then he was able to play for Phillies. So it's always you never know when his lower half is just going to be barking.
I just feel like he can't even feel the thing anymore. Like he just can't feel his lower half anymore. Like I mean, yeah, obviously he can still walk, but it's just like I don't know. I feel like all the problems we're seeing with Starling Marte, obviously it's the age, of course, but he's coming off the double groin surgery. He's had tons of hamstring issues. The quad
I
issues,
wonder if he is here, like let's say next season, if personnel allowing, he DHs next year. I do wonder, just because
I don't want him being the DH, but yeah.
who's your alternative if JD Martinez is 1 year deal? That's kind of where they're at.
If they still believe in Vientos, they still believe in Beatty. You still have a hole to patch up there.
Like I said, Vientos is probably your starting third baseman.
Yeah,
or Ronnie. I mean, but again, I think Ronnie. I think Ronnie could be at second. Like, there's still a lot.
And Ronnie, it's going to take a while for him to recover from his situation.
So there's still a lot that needs to happen, but I don't know. I just think I'm curious to see just kind of how that develops. Like, he's obviously not going to stay at that clip.
I would personally put him in left field for his trade value. I'd put him in left field. Like, I'd put him in left field in terms of the trade value, because he has been contributing with the bat. Because obviously at the trajectory they're going, on the pace right now, they're on pace to sell. And to showcase it, to show that he has some kind of defensive ability, it's not going to happen in right field. I think we've already established that the last 2 years he's been one of the worst defensive right fielders in all of the game. And it's just been, not to mention, obviously it's going into hard luck, of course, but there's been so many situations so far.
He'd be a perfect left fielder in Fenway Park, where he just has a big monster behind him, just use that cannon. Like, he'd be so perfect in Fenway and left field. Like, he'd be excellent.
There you go. And the Red Sox are competing.
Honestly, it would. Now I think it's a good ballpark.
Red Sox are in playoff contention, so if they want Marte, call us up.
Between the monster, that right center, Marte, his gap to gap line drives, I don't know. I think he'd fit really, really well in Boston, really well. But just hypothetical.
The Red Sox want him. The Braves want him. Anybody, ask us. If you need an outfielder, we'll give him to you. If you need a stolen base threat from 6 years ago, but I think that in terms of showcasing his value, and again, I'm saying this, in the long term more, I think the left field is better off with him, and I don't think that they're going to that direction yet, as severity as they are, but time's kind of running out to that trade deadline. We're 2 months away. So I would put him in left field.
Yeah, I look at it like Cespedes, where, this is a guy that he had to play center field for the Mets, but he had his lackadaisical moments too, obviously very infamously, when you really don't need it. But with his arm and trying to compromise his lower half, left field, you're kind of able to kind of ease that a little bit. So, there's other examples where, it is an option. I would hope they pursue it sooner than later, but we'll see.
Double groin surgery. What is it? Double heel surgery that Cespedes had, and then the broken ankle or whatever. Yeah. So, it does. I think it'll ease the pain. And I to be honest, I think he'll probably hit better if he's playing left field. Like, he'll probably even hit even more, get more extra base hits than he's already getting. And I think that, I just think that's the best way to
steal more. That would also increase his value tremendously, because that's the thing. I mean, I was really hoping with the rule changes, he'd be a big time beneficiary for it, but it really, especially this season,
timeline just hasn't added up with his health. It just really hasn't. And I personally don't think he's injured. I think he's healthy. It's just, this is what he is.
It's this is what's left.
He's 35
and he has
now.
to preserve it too. There's
age exists.
It's very high risk.
It's just, age exists right now, and it's really hard to have somebody like that on the team that's making $20 million a year to just give you tools when he feels like it. Like
good but not great hitting.
Not great at all. I mean, obviously good to anchor the bottom of the lineup. Let's just say that. Good enough for that. But he's definitely not been one of the concerns offensively with us this year. So, that's been actually pretty good overall in a nutshell, but there comes with a lot of flaws that are going on with him, with his age and his health, and there's just a lot of concerns. Now, in terms of health, we obviously did get an update, which is kind of transitional, shall we say, on Kodai Senga. Now, with Kodai Senga's health, It's obviously very up in the air because he did have a shoulder injury, which we've talked about all the time, where shoulders are a lot more trickier than elbows. Shoulders can be very unpredictable. Now, I do want to give a little bit of a refresher of the timeline that has been going on with Kodai Senga since spring training when he went down with this injury. He did begin the regular season on the injured list. He still is. He had a capsule strain in his right shoulder. I think it was like a exterior posterior strain, something like that. But he was rehabbing. He seemed to be on course to return as of right now, as we were recording this in June. Just didn't really happen. He threw a 20-pitch session against high A Brooklyn hitters off the Citi Field mound on May 15th. But then he did pause the rehab process to make some mechanical adjustments. He just was not feeling right in terms of his shoulder, in terms of his tricep. And in terms of his tricep, he did experience some tricep tightness while trying to fix up these adjustments, of course. And he did not throw a scheduled bullpen session on that May 19th. It had low level of concern, and he received a cortisone shot in that tricep muscle on the 24th of May, and he seemed to be fine. He has continued to throw long toss, some soft toss as well, mixing a little bit, with the hope of starting to throw bullpen sessions earlier this week. And Carlos Mendoza did basically full-on confirm it, even though we really knew for a while. But Carlos Mendoza did confirm that Kodai Senga will not pitch in the first half of the 2024 season. So Kodai Senga's health has definitely been a main floating question mark that has gone on with the Mets all season long, mainly because we were relying on him at the top of that rotation to give them length. And, we knew in terms of the volume issues, nobody was going to replace the 160 innings that you could potentially get from Kodai Senga. And I think that, it was something that the Mets were hurting from at the beginning, no matter what. It was going to be a hole in the rotation, whether Sevy or Manaea or Quintana pitched well, or Tyler McGill breaks out, or Peterson pitches well. It was going to be a hole in the rotation no matter what. And I think that what everybody was kind of pointing to was, when is he going to get back? When is Kodai Senga going to get back? We need to get him back here as quick as possible. But like we've said, shoulders are a lot more trickier than elbows, and you just don't know how you're going to feel in the morning as compared to how you're going to feel at night. It's just a constant day-to-day process with how shoulders are. They're very, very unpredictable. There's no conclusion as compared to elbows, where there's Tommy John or there's bone spur surgeries. Shoulders are a lot different from elbows. And I think that right now, like I said, we've all pretty much known that he wasn't going to pitch in the first half this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a shame to see how many setbacks there's been, honestly. It's been very frustrating, too, just because you know what Kodai is capable of and the potential that he has coming off of a phenomenal rookie season, and wanting to see him build on that. But having him down, and it's, whether it's the mechanics, whether it's something with the health itself, the fact that he keeps getting pushed off more and more is a really bad sign. Obviously, the fact that, we're hoping maybe June 1st, whatever, now no first half of the season. And, the Mets, obviously, they played better this week. But I think that once it's all said and done and the first half of the season does happen and we see where the team is at, I think that would also determine how I'm approaching Kodai Senga as far as, the way he returns. And if he is able to return, it screams six-man rotation. I mean, it really does. I
did
think,
from the very beginning before he even got hurt. I mean,
but I think, it just makes so much more sense just to kind of keep him like that, because, they give him a little more of a workload, a little more similar to what he's used to as far as the work that he was doing in Japan. Like, it would be a little more like that. And also innings, you reduce the limit. You also, and just allows you a better chance of keeping him healthy. And I think that's also going to be relevant in case Christian Scott, who really should be back, I hope, this week, now that London's over, keeping his innings under control. And if anybody else shows up, just in case there's some other young pieces who might be added to this rotation, I think that, Tyler McGill is another guy who would be awesome with a six-man. I mean, not awesome, but like I could definitely see a lot of benefit of him being in a six-man rotation with his health history. Obviously, these older guys, Severero's got health history. Like it just makes so much sense for this team to be in a six-man rotation if Senga does come back. But if they are total sellers, they are out of it. Everybody's gone. You really got to be very careful with how you're working him back in and really not pushing it. I want to actually see what he's doing and helping the team out. And when it matters, I don't want to risk another injury where the team is out of it. So that would be, and lose him again. So I think that, just really trying to keep the slow approach. I just think that, his potential is so much that he's like something really good for us. I don't want to waste, so to speak. So I do want them to kind of keep this cautious approach.
Yeah, I think I've gotten to the point where, we were way past the timeline that we expected. We thought mid-May around spring training. Then we thought about June. It's June 9th now. I'm at the point where if there's one more slowdown, shut him down. Just shut him down. Because I think that, yes, either if the Mets are competitive or not, I think there's two different ways to look at it. One, yes, you probably could keep him healthy with a six-man rotation. It is possible that can happen. But I really don't want to kind of build up his innings or build up his arm just for the Mets, just for the Mets to not even like be in or be on the fringe of contention, obviously. If the Mets continue to play well and continue to fight through any adversity that they come through, the top hitters start to hit a little bit more consistently, fine. But I have definitely leaned a lot closer towards the Mets just shutting down Kodai Senga for the rest of the year. And that's more of a selfish reason, and it's a shitty way to look at it, but there is a clause in his contract that we do need to talk about, obviously, in terms of the Mets' future with a lot of these players of what they're going to do long term. He needs 400 innings pitched in 3 years in order to opt out after the third year in his contract. So he pitched 166 innings last year. So by that math, he is going to need over 200 innings in order to get that opt-out. I personally, in terms of the Mets long-term of where, Kodai Senga, I would just shut him down in terms of where he can't get to that 400 innings pitched, because I think that it's coming straight from the horse's mouth of when we have said from Steve Cohen. He said that pitching is very expensive. And to have somebody here in Kodai Senga, in terms of the opt-outs, without the opt-outs, the full-on 5-year contract, to have him here, $15 million a year, that goes to a back-end starter these days. I feel like in terms of building up the rotation, in terms of everything else they're going to have to address, whether they do it in free agency or whether they try to stay internal, I think that you need your top guy here, and you kind of need to manipulate it a little bit more, because I've definitely seen, obviously in the past, the Mets have really paid a lot of money for a lot of pitching in the past, and they just have been underwhelming, obviously, because no one's going to be living up to those contracts, whether you talk about Verlander or Scherzer.
They're still paying them now, and they're not on the team. Yeah. That's how bad it went. They are still paying pitchers hot max money. I mean, obviously, the teams took portions of it, but still, these were max money pitchers that are now
could be paying
teams.
Verlander as well. So, and again, listen, I understand we have Cohen's money, yes, but Cohen said pitching's expensive, and I go by that motto because it is. It will continue to be expensive because it comes at a premium these days. So if you have Kodai Senga for the next 3 years making $15 million a year, giving you ace stuff when he's on the field, that I feel like has a better security blanket than him just coming back in a lost season. And again, this is on the pace that they are on right now. We don't know. Maybe they get on a hot streak. Maybe they become 2 games over 500 at the All-Star break. Maybe they become, maybe they're in the race. They're 2 games out of the wild card. We don't know. But at the pace that they're going right now, there really is not much to justify allowing Kodai Senga to pitch this year. And that I feel like it's either being smart with his health and also being smart with the contract, as to where we've been burned in the past with the Mets, giving out a lot of contracts, giving a lot of money out to pitchers, giving an additional amount of money, and with the, the state income tax, if you want to say, in New York. But it's really, really hard to just justify Kodai Senga completely coming back. And I understand the starting pitching is hurting, and they definitely need him in order to win. But right now I'm kind of looking at it in the long term, because you kind of have to look at that in the sense of you really need pitching to sustain. It's a really big part of your team in order to keep it sustainable. Obviously, you have David Stearns to help that out, but in terms of health, in terms of your ace, I think that unless says he's ready to go and he wants to come back next season, there isn't really many reasons as to why I would just keep Kodai Senga on the ropes, string him along throughout the entire year. At one point, very close as to where if one more step escalates, I'm shutting him down. I think that that's the best decision as to why they need to do that. Now, for those of you in the chat, I think somebody was asking about, in terms of shoulder injuries, this is another one. Yuki Matsui is asking. He is asking, why would Corbin Burnes come to play with a team on a 6-man rotation? I don't think they're going to go after Burnes. Obviously, this is a different topic. But I think that, he actually did work in a 6-man rotation with David Stearns there in Milwaukee. It's obviously a 5-man rotation now in Baltimore, where he is pitching right now. He's pitched like that before, and it's definitely helped him ramp himself up. But I will say that if, you were to go after pitching, you'd obviously have to make those types of accommodations. And that's probably another reason why the Mets got a little bit more of the lower tier or the more bounce back candidates on the free agent market. And, that's going to be something to consider. But as of right now, in the picture that I'm looking at it, Kodai Senga is our number 1. He can pitch like a number 1. I know he can when he's on the field. But in terms of his health, I'm not really that far off to where I'm shutting him down for the rest of the year. I think that that's pretty much well justifiable. Guys, let us know in the chat what you guys think about Kodai Senga and that whole situation, because I understand that he is a very important part to this team, and everybody wants to win right now, but in terms of the long term, it's really, really hard in order to just predict what is going to happen. Like I said, with the shoulder, who knows? Who knows what's going to go on with shoulder injuries? Again, a lot less unpredictable as compared to elbows. Anything else you want to add, Frank? Because I think that the
30-year-old rookie part is interesting. I think that it's not something that you commonly see. So I feel like as time goes on, kind of how he ages, and was that his best season, that rookie year? I don't know. Like that's kind of interesting. I'm wondering, like, can he get better? Can he be close to that form? Because that's really what's going to matter. If he does stay close to that level and he's here for a few years, that's awesome. Like you said, that kind of AAV number is fantastic. Yeah. So that would be a big plus. That would be a really big plus.
And Ace getting paid like a back-end starter. Who can reject that? And I hate having to manipulate the innings, but the Mets need something to carry over to the next year, because every single year they're filling in 6 spots of the rotation. They're bringing in depth. They're bringing in, it's just at one point, they got to manipulate this some way. And he's cutting close. Right now he's projected on all projective systems to give you 50 innings this year, because he's still on pace to bring you back. That would be 210. And then, it's a stretch to 190 after that. But do you really want to take that risk in terms of how pitching becomes as a premium here? I mean, I'm just talking about it in terms of future, in terms of 2025. It's just really, really hard to get a pitcher on that type of rookie deal or on that type of back-end deal when he's a frontline stuff. I mean, we saw Kodai Senga on the mound. You know, it wasn't a myth. He wasn't a ghost. He has a ghost fork. But, you know, at the end of the day, pitching's expensive. And we hope that these pitching prospects do develop and, you know, they can be part of the rotation. But, you know, in terms of experience, Kodai Senga's the guy. He's their number one pitcher right now, and there's maybe a possibility as to maybe somebody like Brandon Sproat to call him up. And Project Ball does say this. He says, I don't care if it's unorthodox, call up Sproat. The guy's throwing out 101 in the minors with good control. Yes, he is. And let me tell you, we can go on with Brandon Sproat because we do have a little bit of extra time here. But with Brandon Sproat, I'd call him up right now. I would. Stop wasting those bullets out in the minors because he seems to be ready. He seems to be getting that quality. He's 23 years old. He's not 19 like Jonah Tong or another. Who's the other pitcher that we have? Calvin Ziegler. He's like 20. Mm-hmm. You know, he's seasoned. You know, he's seasoned. He played like, what was it, 3 years in college or something. He's been there for a while. So I think that, you know, we should see him. I think we should call him up. Same thing goes with Tidwell as well. I don't see anybody at the major league level blocking him out to do that.
Or just
especially when the trade deadline comes by.
Skip Syracuse altogether.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Syracuse doesn't mean shit. It really doesn't. Like, it really is nothing. And Christian Scott, he had, 2 starts in Syracuse? Yeah, he's a little bit older. But, you know, he 2 starts in Syracuse, that's enough. You know, there's a reason why pitchers don't spend that much time there.
It's tough because
not a comp level.
Yeah, it's tough because again of where they are in the standings. I'm kind of with Sproat, like that's such a electric arm, a starter going 101, just the way he's pitching. I do worry about the major league innings total and things like that. You know, I just. The way I look at him, I kind of look at it the way the Mets handled Noah. You know, I think Syndergaard obviously had this very live arm, and the timing was right. Where, you know, here's a team that was really competitive. You had a good rotation, you want to add to it. You call up Noah, he gives you that extra spark. I think that this team right now is in such a limbo state where it's like, could they get hot and get back in it? Are they out of it? Like they're right in that in between that. I just don't know if it's the right time.
I understand wanting to talk about the competition. I understand that, but you also have that instance where there's not really much competition in the minor leagues. Like he's wasting these bullets again. If the stuff's ready, the stuff is ready, and it's obviously major league stuff right now. And we're talking about like a guy who's not walking anybody and gassing 101. Now, does that spark interest in terms of a certain pitcher that we did have that, left? What was it, 2 years ago? Yes, I get it. I get like the excitement.
And he wasn't throwing that in the minors.
He wasn't throwing 101 at that point. And that's my point. Like, how long is he going to be this effective? How long, is he going to be healthy? I don't want him hurting himself against, a 27-year-old ex-accountant,
Which again, he's another guy, 6-man rotation, said you work that young arm slowly through the majors. Don't just kind of burn him out. Be like, here's,
absolutely.
Which, I mean, we'll have time, but still, it's not a situation like, oh, here's 200 innings where we've never handled it before. And it's like, good luck to your arm.
I get that. And in terms of Brandon Sproat, it has been a little bit of a struggle for him to go consistently past the 5th inning. Like there has been some points of it, but again, the glory of a 6-man rotation, it definitely helps with the conditioning of these arms. And, you kind of have to be a 6-man rotation with your top guy in Senga if you were to bring him back. And even if Senga comes back, I mean, they're going to have to use a 6-man rotation, whether they're in it or out of it. So I think that most of the pitching prospects are at an advantage where they can, come up, whether it's Tidwell or Sproat or, Dom Hamill, who's struggled a lot this year.
And I think the benefit too is just kind of saying, okay, is this guy the real deal? I think that's also another good sense of it, because like you talked about with the Senga segment, as far as like the cost of starting pitching, it's like, okay, well, do I need to invest heavily in free agency and starting pitching, or am I good internally with Senga, with Scott, with Sproat, with Tidwell, and I just need to maybe bring back a Sevy, or just like I just need like I don't need as much as I thought, or maybe I do need more than I thought. I think it kind of allows you to more so get a sense of where your team is at and what you really need to kind of focus on.
Yeah, I also like calling these guys up, when the team's uncompetitive.
Because I love what I've seen from Scott. Yeah. I mean, I know like it's been a first year, like not everything is perfect, but I think overall there's a lot to like. There really is a lot to like with how he approaches the way he pitches, and I like what I see.
Yeah, I think that, when you look at it as a whole, I think that the best way to look at it is, if the Mets are out of it, and I get it, like, if the Mets are competitive, the whole Noah Syndergaard situation, which is a really good comparison, I'm not going to lie, because, like, it's a really good way to look at it. The Mets were trying to compete. They bring up a big prospect who we know has this big-time stuff. And the way that I kind of look at it is, with Brandon Sproat, with these prospects, which I think that is the best way to look at it right now in this day and age, is the Mets can bring up Sproat if they're out of it or they're in it. If they're out of it, there's zero pressure that comes to the kid. He comes in with zero pressure. There's no heat on him. There's no expectations, and he can just be him. He can just be that guy. He can be the guy that he always has been in the minor leagues, and see if that translates to the major leagues. Same thing went with Ronnie Mauricio, right? When he came up in September, they called him up. They were out of the race. Ronnie got comfortable with the major leagues, and there was no criticism. There was no big criticism. There was no heat down his neck. Obviously, everyone calling him a bust from going 0 for 10 or something. But at the end of the day, there wasn't anything depending on him. He could just showcase what he can do. And, obviously it's a different story, position player to pitcher, but I think that that's the best way to look at it, as to where, a high ceiling pitcher, you can bring him up here, and, it definitely would be a good situation as to where you can condition his arm every 6 days in a 6-man rotation, and also there's just not really much pressure on the kid. And
I would look at it probably like a little after the trade deadline, like around like that August. It's like September.
Same goes with Tidwell too.
Yeah, like I think that's like you said, like a safe time to like just try it out, see how it goes. Yeah. It's still major league competition with low pressure, not a heavy workload, and just kind of get a sense. I think that's a good introduction. Give them enough time, not like the way they handled. Even though his rookie went really well, like Francisco Alvarez, where it's like, okay, last week of the season, big series against the Braves, go ahead. Like, like
that was stupid.
That's not the best way to approach it. But I think, trying to kind of keep it like that is much safer.
Yeah. I think, in terms of where you look at it, in terms of the rotation, there's going to be some pieces that are going to be on the trade market at the trajectory that they're going in. And speaking of the trade market, I do want to move to some of the trade rumors that have gone on. And we're going to probably do this every single episode now, called the rumor mill, where basically it's just, a mill kind of like rotates and, things just rotate in and out. That's kind of how I look at it. But in terms of like some scatter reports that have gone on, because we're close to trade deadline season, and right now, obviously the Mets in the sell trajectory right now. So this is what we've got recently. Regarding Jeff McNeil, there was something that John Heyman did say, talking about the Mariners as a possible suitor for Jeff McNeil. And, he obviously said, it adds the change of scenery, where he can get back to his old self again, yada, yada, yada. Of course, we know that the Mariners, they strike out a lot as a team. They need a more contact first type of lineup. They need somebody to anchor that lineup. Jeff McNeil would be a really good fit. And then obviously in terms of other pieces that the Mets could auction off, we did get Robert Murray saying that the Mets and Brewers could be two teams that do link up at the trade deadline. Obviously, with the Brewers, they're in competition. They're in contention as of right now, so they might want to add to their rotation. They've had some injuries as well this year. So it could be a possibility where, you link it up to Sean Manaea or Luis Severino, Jose Quintana at the deadline. And obviously Nightingale, putting the Mets as one of the top destinations to get your starting pitching rentals. Obviously, they're not going to get much back for them because they are rentals, but he did say that the Mets are expecting to eventually shop Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, and Jose Quintana at the deadline with several teams in the pitching market. So there could be a good auction off. But again, like the top offer is not going to be different to the bottom offer. Very slim, let's just say, pickings of, 1 year rentals. But obviously the Jeff McNeil part of it is the most, let's say it's the most intriguing, because obviously Jeff McNeil is not a free agent after the end of the year. He is, he does have 2 more years on his contract, which are the 2 years that they added to his extension, which should not have happened. But I won't open that can of worms again. But in terms of Jeff McNeil, one of our co-hosts, Andrew, has been banging the drum for Jeff McNeil to be traded to Seattle. And the fact that that has been reported is kind of funny. I wish Andrew were here to kind of victory lap on this, because that kind of would be funny. But it is definitely a need for a Seattle team that has a lot of swing and miss in it. A little bit more contact where they can have a little bit more stability there. Obviously, Jeff McNeil hasn't been able to do that at the rate of his career this year and recently, but definitely more experience there for a Mariners team that is trying to compete as of right now. I think that one takeaway that I have from this is I get Jeff McNeil probably will have somewhat of a market. It's going to be a small one, obviously, considering the contract situation and the term. But I just don't see a situation where he gets traded. I just don't see any way that they can move that contract. And the reason why I say that is that, yes, $12 million is very easy to move. And yes, he struggled. I think that $12 million is easy when he struggled. But the last 2 years of this contract, I think people do forget, which also pisses me off the most, is that he gets a $3 million raise. It's backloaded, which pisses me off a lot. It is the same luxury tax, but in terms of the actual payroll, it's going to be a little bit harder to offload that, especially with multiple years that you would take on. You're going to need a lot of teams with, luxury tax space, and there's not many out there that are willing to go over it, especially for a player like Jeff McNeil. I mean, what do you think about the possibility of that market? I think you're muted. I believe you're muted. All right.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It is not likely. I think, not only the contract, but just the fact that he's not playing well. I think that's the other thing that really kind of hurts the market is that, like, yes, if Jeff McNeil was, I wouldn't say batting title McNeil, but let's say 300 batting average Jeff McNeil, just for the sake of argument. Sure.
2020 Jeff McNeil.
Sure, he's a great fit for Seattle. They are a team that is struggling a lot offensively. Jorge Polanco, their second baseman, has been bad and is hurt. So, yes, there is a opening at second base right now where they could use a bit of a punch. And listen, McNeil, he's been bad this year, but Jorge Polanco's been worse. I'm looking just at the numbers of a lot of the guys in the Seattle lineup. Their numbers aren't far off from the way
they're like us.
Yeah,
they're like
it's
us.
Not far off from where McNeil's numbers are. So
yeah,
it's interesting. It would definitely be a different environment for him where it's much less pressure. Being in a place like Seattle, it's not like a New York, a Philly, a Boston, where they're just all over you. So it would let him kind of get a different sense, a different set of eyes on him, different coaching. Maybe something clicks. I don't know. They kind of find more of a sustainable approach for him. Maybe but like I get it, but in the same sense, it's like when Andrew talked about this, it was more so the idea of, okay, Seattle has like so many young, talented pitchers. You have
too late.
Your Wu, your Gilbert, your Kirby. You can go on and on, like all the talented arms that are there. That was the whole idea of, okay, we trade McNeil, we get some young pitching that we could really need. McNeil is not going to net you those guys now. Yeah, I mean, that's the other part where it's like, okay, well, what Seattle giving us in return? If it is a pitcher that does have high upside, that has really good stuff, just needs some tweaking. Sure. Again, I mean, I think that, again, like I said with McNeil, what really has bothered me is just the fact that right now he's kind of in that situation where, like Quintana, he doesn't have that thing that, like Beatty, like he doesn't have that thing that's really great. He doesn't have that thing that really stands out.
Yeah.
Again, like not plus speed, not a plus glove, not a plus bat. Like he doesn't have like that one thing. Okay, he's really good at this. So if I could get a player who is maybe not as complete, but does have one thing that they do at an elite level, but the other stuff might be a little raw and they're on the younger side, I'll take that chance. And it's like, okay, at least there's a little more upside. There's more potential. Getting a piece like that could be even on the prospect level is something that I think would make sense, that we know this organization can need. It's like, okay, maybe there is like another outfielder with a lot of power and is young. Like we could use that in the farm system to try to work that up. Because we've talked about it, like there are like some of those weaknesses internally, even though the farm system has improved. Like, yes, 6 top 100 prospects in baseball right now, particularly a lot of it on that pitching side. There still are those weaknesses within the organization that you could try to plug in a little bit with the guys that have these like raw tools in certain spots.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I would probably go on the route of like lower value for lower value if you're going to go with Seattle, because they have a lot of pitchers right now that are injured. So maybe trade for a guy who's injured, that lowers the value or something. Somebody that you can maybe take on. Don't get Trevor Gott. Just don't do that. Let's not do something like that. Let's just do, somebody who, maybe a high floor type of pitcher, number 5 at best. Just, tweak the starting depth, and eventually you'll get something in the future. If he's injured, he's not injured, but whatever, the guy gets healthy or whatever, he rehabs, whatever, I guess like somebody who can come back, he's sitting on the 40-man roster, comes back, whatever. You're not going to get much for Jeff McNeil. We know that you're not going to. You're going to probably have to move a lot of money, and you're probably going to have to cover a lot of it. And I've talked about this before. I believe, frozen on the on my end. For me, my camp's frozen. This happened last time.
You are
I might have to come back. But in terms of McNeil, when I say this, just like it's going to be a very limited options now with him declining as a player.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot harder to move, obviously, when the player is not playing well. Like we talked about, the other thing that is going against McNeil is the current age that he's at. Being in that 32 range, just from watching sports that the player is going to be declining. They are going to be getting worse as the years go on. The hope is that, okay, yes, he's not going to be 2022 McNeil, but you get something that's better than 2024, but not as good as 2022. Like if you're the team trading for him, you're hoping to meet somewhere in the middle, because again, as you getting closer to the mid 30s, that's not going to happen as far as getting those great seasons out of him. And again, what concerns me the most, I would say, is just the drastic decline on the defensive side. This is a guy that we were talking about, 5 WAR on defense, maybe a Gold Glove caliber. Now he's a negative on defense at second base. That's something that also just makes the value even harder to move, even with the offensive struggles. So that's the other thing that really concerns me, is that he doesn't, again, have those redeeming qualities right now. It's like, okay, at least he's still doing this well for me. Again, could Seattle maybe use him more in an outfield role a little bit? Maybe just use more of a super utility guy. Kind of, like we said, I mean, his utility is kind of limited. Like you're looking at corner, outfield, and second. Like that isn't much. I mean, he could play first, but do you really want to? Like you want to take Ty France out? I mean, like I don't know. It
was value 2 years ago. Tough. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I mean,
and
it's
they didn't utilize it. So, like I said, I mean, I don't want to open the can of words for last week, which turned into a massive screaming match between opposing parties. But it just like at the time, the 2 batting champions were Jeff McNeil, and it was Luis Ariz. Luis Ariz was traded that same year for Pablo Lopez. Pablo Lopez, good rubber arm, good mid-rotation guy, could be a front-load guy at his best. And the Mets, they didn't trade Jeff McNeil, which is fine if they wanted to keep him, but they had 2 years of control on him. But then they said, let's double down and give him a 4-year deal. So it just, and that was another part of the conversation, I think, last week that we kind of, further away from it. I think that it's the fact that the Mets had the years of control there, which frustrates me as to where, okay, they could give him a raise. They could buy out these arbitration years, but it's like, if you're going to keep Jeff McNeil after a career year. Sure, you're totally inclined to do that. But to just like jump ahead and just be like, okay, this is a 30-year-old and I want to buy out his RB years and then add another 2 and then also give him a club option, which makes no sense. Then backload it when he's older. It just not a contract I would have done. And I think that that's kind of put them in a little bit tougher of a spot here, especially with the guy, his skills
feel like
deteriorating the way they have.
The only reason why they would also backload is because of the current financial situation they were in with, like we talked about, with the pitchers getting paid so much money. In addition to like all the other guys who are not currently rostered getting paid, the McCanns, obviously the Robinson Cano situation. And we talked about how the long-term books were much cleaner and a lot more, you could kind of throw some money on there. You wouldn't be paying like, McNeil's going to get better with time, so we're going to pay him more then. I think it's more so just kind of the situation they're in immediately, which is something that I think they do need to get better at, as far as, like I said, when I was looking at their numbers, just the way they disparage the money in general. I mean, they could benefit from some deferred payments on some of these guys. I know everyone gets so caught up on like Bobby Bonilla Day and things like that, and
they did start doing that. They did start doing that with JD Martinez. They did do that.
They did, but that's no.
Diaz has.
I think I just think JD's contract wasn't that big. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a 1-year deal, so it's not gonna. I don't know. I'm looking more so at like the Dodgers, like these long-term, big time guys that are now at like good AAVs because of what they were able to do.
Yeah, I just look at it in terms of where in no way, shape, or form I'm not giving a second baseman $15 million. Like, in no way, shape, or form would I ever do that. I get like he would get but I'm not giving it to, somebody who's in their 30s that is going to, age, whether it was good or not, whether he ages well or not. No. I'm not giving $15 million to a second baseman unless the guy is a 30 home run threat like Simeon or a 30 home run threat like Jose Altuve. Usually, the least power on the field is the second baseman. Typically, like I'm not giving $15 million to that, whether he has the whether he has the positional versatility or not, whether he won a batting title or not, whether he, showed good projections or not. It's just not a position I would invest $15 million into. It's like, again, like I said, $15 million, it's so precious. Like I said, with Kodai Senga, making $15 million, that can be applied elsewhere. And it's put them in a really tough spot as to where, we've seen the worst of Jeff McNeil. We've seen the best of Jeff McNeil, but we don't know which one is going to come every single year. And recently it's been the worst of Jeff McNeil. Like, I think people forget, obviously, the worst year of his career was before he won that batting title. So it's not like he wasn't going to not come back to it, or there wasn't a possibility he wouldn't come back to it. We've seen that happen before. And I think that they've put themselves in that position as to where, it's going to be really, really hard to move a contract like McNeil. And, I think that, like, it's not really similar to the situation with McCann where he wasn't providing shit. Like McNeil is still, in a nutshell, currently, he still is a major league player. He's on the cusp of going down the minor leagues, but he's still a major league player. And it's really hard, with James McCann, fringe backup catcher, it's a different story as to where, we had to take on 75% of it just to get a player to be named later who is still in diapers. So, like, that's how severe it was as to where, but with Jeff McNeil, it's a little different. There's a little bit more value there, but it's also a position where it's like, second base, you can, again, like I said, I can find them at the flea market. Like I could replace that at the flea market if he's not, a stolen base threat with the singles he gets or, contact first type of guy. It's just, there's a lot of things that they're handcuffed to with Jeff McNeil. And in terms of the trade market, they're going to have to move. They're going to have to make a lot of magic. Let's just say that. And I think that's what's really scares me about the possibility because, again, that just a $3 million raise for Jeff McNeil going into a 33-year-old season, that's tough. That is really, really tough. It's a tough sell, especially when he hasn't been playing well.
I mean, it's not the best course of business. I mean, no one's going to recommend doing that, with, like I said, with age and all those things considered. But, listen, it's not the first contract mistake the Mets have made or the second, and it won't be the last. They are fortunate where, again, like they do live in the Steve Cohen era where this isn't going to handicap them so that they still can do other things. But I'm curious to see what happens. Like if he gets moved, I don't know if it's this year. They're just in that tough spot because, like we said, because then what happens is like right now, Jose Iglesias is outplaying him in general. So you're also kind of forced with a situation like, with McNeil, he was on the bench a lot this week. They were in a situation they're facing a lot of left-handed pitchers. So they were able to kind of had a built-in excuse to do it. But if you are saying like, okay, we still are trying to win, we haven't sold off yet. Technically the best course of action is to have Jose Iglesias play every day. So I do wonder how they're going to manage that.
You can't showcase McNeil either way.
And then going forward in the long term, it's like, okay, well, do we let him continue to block Acuna and Jett Williams? And in our graphic, we have Jett Williams is currently he underwent the right wrist surgery and everything like that. But still, it's like how long do we also let Acuna get blocked? Does that potentially block a spot for Ronnie if Mark Vantos is our third baseman? You know what I mean? Like there's still like those other questions that stuff to be answered. And like you said, if he's not getting a chance to be showcased, it does make it hard to build up that trade value for where a team would take him with that contract that is also still yet to be completed.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted about this. I think it was yesterday or 2 days before, and I'm going to try to find it here. But in terms of like the deferred payments, I mean, 2022 we had Cano on here. 2023 we had Cano and McCann. 2024 we had McCann, Scherzer, and Verlander. I mean, they have pretty much not only had retained salaries.
And now they have Narvaez as well, where it's like
they do have Narvaez too. So
to like not be here.
And Jorge Lopez, if you want to count that, like they're covering that
different
bit, but
situation.
That's like,
and
that's
much
$2 million.
Yeah, much lesser number.
Yeah. But in terms of like retained salaries, they have a lot.
I'm saying like good deferred payments. Like the guy is still here.
Oh yeah,
we get a really good player at a smaller, dollar
obviously. And the deferred payments is definitely something they have to do. But I think that like the retained salaries in terms of the damage that was already done, it's the fact that the Mets not only they've had retained salaries on their payroll the last 3 seasons, but they've added a new one every single year. And it's really hard to be like
clear it.
Yeah, it's really hard for them to fully clear it and kind of stand up this way, especially with the luxury tax, which, Steve Cohen's made it clear that it's going to be really hard for us to stay, under the $300 million threshold. And you think about it and you're like, okay, Scherzer, Verlander, McCann, they all come off the books. But then you're like, okay, we're not finished because maybe there's a possibility where you have to designate Jeff McNeil for assignment and you have to retain his salary. Maybe there's Starling Marte that you have to retain his salary. So it just keeps going and going and going. And obviously it's all damage that has been done. It's water under the bridge. But like when you think about it, they're really, really stuck if they can't trade him because like Jose Iglesias, like you said, he's playing better than him. He should be playing over him. He's earned the spot to play over him. You can't showcase him. He doesn't have much trade value. He's making a lot of money, more money than he is this year, next year. And there's term, like they're really locked in to this Jeff McNeil situation. And that's what really does frustrate me. It really does because again, you didn't need to extend him, which sucks. Like you didn't need to extend him. You had 2 years of control in front of him. And, if he continued to play like that, maybe you give him an extension, after that. But the fact that you had 2 years of control and then you add another 2 years of control with extending him with more money, it's just not a way I would spend a backloaded $15 million. It really put them in a really tough spot. And it's not like he's detrimental to the payroll. No, he's not, because of the flexibility they have with Cohen. But the whole point is, like, spending $15 million willy-nilly, that's just stupid. Like Omar Narvaez, $50 million just down the drain for no reason. Like, they really need to spend this money a lot better, but they're also going to pay the repercussions of what happened in the past, and it's going to continue like that.
And I think you're starting to see that with as many one-year signings that David Stearns did this season. And we talked about, like, on that next graphic, the next, like, little paragraph in there, as far as, like, all the arms that could be available. It's like, you have Severino, you have Minaya, you have and now Quintana, but at the time Quintana's like a 3-year deal. But still, it's like you put yourself in this position where it's like, okay, we talked like that out plan, like that exit strategy, basically, where it's like, okay, I sign these guys to 1-year deals, these bounce back candidates. Severino's pitching really good for me. If I'm in it, I have a really good pitcher at a good dollar amount. If I'm out of it, it's very easy to move him, and I could still get some value and still make the most out of my assets. So I think you're seeing that difference as far as, like, David Stearns did not come in here and be like, 3-year deal, that we saw that infamous Black Friday, the Marte, the Canna, the Escobar, multi-year deals to everybody. Here we go, let's go do it. All 30 and above. Didn't do that. Like you see a different philosophy as far as, like, you still always maintain that flexibility of, like, I could get out of this deal if it doesn't work out. If it does work, then I'll make my extension. But I don't always have to commit the 3 years if one will do, depending on how my team is doing. So he's definitely been much more conservative and, more, just like thinking ahead a little bit more. He's thinking more like long-term and not just being so, like we talked so much about, impulsive and just like sign this guy, a veteran. He's been an all-star before, sign him. You know what I mean? Like they've been much more like, okay, wait a minute. Like, what's the other way that we can approach this? It's been a good spot.
It's not, it doesn't have to be a name. It has to be a good fit. It has to be a good fit on the team. And obviously, there has been some tough signings. Wendell did not work out. Lopez did not end up working out in terms of, others. Well, not really in terms of talent, but
even, Bader, like, compared to Narvaez, whereas like those are two signs that I
Bader gave you something. He's giving you something.
Well, Bader has given me something, but he's also a 1-year deal, whereas Narvaez was a 2-year deal. Yeah. And that was my concern. I was like, okay, I understand maybe the first year for Narvaez, but I think the year after that, Francisco Alvarez is going to be ready, and I just think you're paying so much for guys going to be a backup. So it's just the fact that they always tag on that second year, where it's like, depending on the player, you don't, like we talked about Marte in the beginning, like they had to add the 4th year to ensure the 3 years or 2 years, so to speak. It depends on the player, like if you have to pay those extra years to have them in the moment. And I think now they're in a team that's not in position where it's like, okay, we need to have the most talent right now because we're a really good team right now in a short window. Like they're,
of course,
like so it's a transition, it's a retool, it's an assessment of the state of the team.
Yeah, I think that when you look at it in terms of the Mets pitching, they have a lot of guys on 1-year deals. They know they can clear the roster spots either way. They know how to do that. But the problem is that in terms of the position player guys, where, the team can get a little bit younger, obviously, David Stearns, I'm going off of what he said. He wants to give, the leash for the young guys to play. And he wants these guys to get their playing time, get their feet wet in AAA before they go into the majors. The problem is that you have a lot of infield and outfield situations where you have these young prospects that, if they come up, they're going to need playing time in order to adjust to the major leagues, whether it's Luis Angel Acuna, Jet Williams down the line, Drew Gilbert if he ever gets healthy. The problem is that you have infield and outfielder. The 2 spots are the most least expendable pieces in McNeil and Marte. 2 pieces that it's really hard to move them because of their contracts. And hopefully they can find a way. I hope they can, because I think that we've already established that neither of them are long-term pieces. going forward.
Yeah, and I think the Mets as a team are in a situation right now with the Alonso being like, we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right now, the only two positions that are technically long-term locked in is shortstop and catcher, and Lindor and Alvarez. Alonso, he might not be here. So it's like there is openings once like the McNeil and Marte clears where it's
you don't know which. I mean, you have Nimmo here, right?
You have Nimmo too. So it's like you have one outfield.
You're good up the middle. Let's just say that.
Like you
have
have
up the middle.
So you have like one outfield spot covered, one shortstop, one catcher. But then again, you're still talking about like another 6, however many positions, like 5 positions where you still have to figure it out long term who's going to be where. And again, like I always use the example, the Braves don't have that problem. They're locked in with guys they like, bunch of long-term deals. Like they know what they have going forward. They know their plan. Right now, we don't know. What do the Mets look like in 5 years? We have no idea. We don't know. It is a lot of unknowns as you get.
We don't know what they look like the next day, to be honest. Like
that's true.
Somebody could be injured. Somebody could be traded. We don't know. Like the next day, we take this day by day here because the Mets are just as nerve-wracking as they can always be. But, that's just kind of how you look at it. I mean, I think that, Nimmo's going to be here. Lindor's going to be here. Alvarez is going to be here. You hope that Vientos maybe is, I think that anybody under the age of 30 is going to stay, whether they're a long-term piece or not. But they're, and another guy, like in terms of trading, and I'll wrap this up here. We'll go to studs and duds. We'll get to the injury report and we'll head on out of here. But in terms of like finding value, in terms of like just like guys who you can move that aren't going to be here long term, they're veterans. You want to make the team younger. Again, like I said, DJ Stewart, I'd put him on the trade market as well. He's shown a lot of value for us. You can get something back for him. He's in his 30s. If he continues to play well as well.
He just has so much term that like
he's got years of control. You can get rid of him whenever you want.
No, but what I'm saying is that like that might be a piece you want to keep just because he does have so much team control. But
I get it. Yeah,
it depends. But again, if you get an awesome
30s,
return,
so,
if you get an awesome return, go for it. But he just does have a lot of control that you're like, oh, wait a second. Like,
yeah, of course. Of course. I mean, he's under team control, but I think that like their desire to get younger, desire to have more tools in this lineup, you're not going to get that from DJ Stewart. And then also, he's 34 and he's on a minor league deal, but see what you can get from Jose Iglesias too. Why not? Again, middle infield spots that you can clear up. If you want to see Acuna up here, I don't think you're going to see Jet this year, but if you want to see some of these middle infielder pieces, go for it. Go all of these guys who have been good on like bargain deals, shop all of them that you don't think they're going to be here long term. Just manage the asset the best way you can. Don't let so many guys get to free agency that have contributed to your roster. Don't let those guys get to free agency without getting something back for them. I think that that's the way that they have to look at it. Anyone over 30 years old, everyone must go. Unless your name is Senga or Diaz, I think. That's pretty much the only over the 30-year-olds that I think I would keep. Oh, Nimmo. And then Lindor. Oh, never mind. Okay, you know what? Screw it. Okay, just going to move on. Obviously, let's pop up the injury report real quick. Francisco Alvarez, he will be returning to the Mets lineup later this week, a little bit delayed due to a family matter in Venezuela. He had to go back home for a day, but he did play a rehab game today in Brooklyn. He did catch Edwin Diaz, who made his second rehab appearance today in High A, Brooklyn. And we could get Alvarez back within the next few games. Same thing goes for Diaz. He is expected to return from the injured list when eligible on July 10th. And then, of course, the biggest injury news, that being one of the Mets' top prospects, Jet Williams, who underwent wrist surgery on Thursday, which is called wrist TFCC debridement procedure. I don't know if I said that right. He was dealing with wrist soreness throughout the entire year. He has not played since April 20th in the minor leagues, and he's expected, with recovery time, to be sidelined 8 to 10 weeks. Also, other news in terms of prospects, we did also see Kevin Parada be placed on the 7-day IL. We still don't know what the injury is, so I'm sure we'll get an update on that as soon as we can. But at this current moment that we are recording this, at this current moment that we are live, we do not know what is going on with Kevin Parada, but he was placed on the IL by the Binghamton Rumble Ponies. Okay, studs and duds. We have only 2 games to work with, but they were eventful 2 games. We'll start with studs. What do you think, Frank?
Yeah, this was difficult because no one really played particularly really well in both games. It was like they did good one game and bad one game. So I'm just going to go with a guy that stood out because I thought the hit was big. I liked the way he did it. JD Martinez, the big 2 RBI hit that he got today, first pitch swinging. I thought that was a welcome change. I think far too often in these big RBI opportunities, in these big spots, the Mets are taking first pitch. Just way, way, way too much. I like JD being aggressive there and just kind of capitalizing off the momentum that the Mets were building, and it really paid off. So, he's just a guy that you trust with the bat in his hands. He just knows the right time when to be aggressive, when to not be aggressive, check his swing. He just has such a great feel that is so unmatched in this lineup. And really, it's made him elite for such a long time that I got to give him props just coming through in a big spot where they really needed it, especially with men on base. It's something that he hasn't done quite as well as I hoped. He's been awesome with no one on base, but just seeing him getting the hit the way he did it, kind of going against the Eric Chavez philosophy, I'm all for that. So more of that, please.
Same here. As for my stud, I actually have 2 here, and I'm going to mention both of them because why not? Obviously, Luis Torrens, huge play at the end of the game, secured it. That's the run prevention that David
and he
Stern
got on base
to
twice
about.
Today, too.
He got on base twice today. He's throwing out runners. I mean, he's made such an impact in the margins so far. He's been here for 4 games, and he's made a really big impact as compared to the catcher we are paying to not even be here right now.
1,139 OPS.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely going to keep that up. Now, but in terms of his offense, I don't think he's going to keep that up. But in terms of his defense, I mean, just a solid all-around player on the field. Definitely an easy guy to pitch to, let's just say, if you're a pitcher. Even though they did struggle in terms of the pitching, obviously we want our big guy, Francisco Alvarez, back here. But in terms of a solid backup, definitely feel a little bit more comfortable with Luis Torrens as compared to somebody like Omar Narvaez, who just has not been good ever since he put on a Mets uniform.
I mean, listen, Luis Torrens has many home runs in a week as Omar Narvaez had in 2 years. So, that tells you a lot.
It does tell you a lot. I mean, it's really fun to be right about a overpaid catcher, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. And also another stud I want to point out because I don't think anybody's talking about this. Since Adrian Hauser moved to the bullpen.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some props.
I mean, a complete change. And again, also as terms of trade market, I hope that they market him as a reliever. Why not? Again, he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. I hope they market him as a reliever. He's just throwing a little more confidence as well. He's not nibbling as much as the Quintana style, obviously. And he's also been able to hemorrhage a little bit more velocity as well. He was touching 94, 95 consistently recently in these last few outings. So he's been pretty good as well. But also in terms of the duds, I think there's 2 really, really clear ones in these 2 games. Frank, if you want to pick one of them, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take Quintana. I think he's the guy that, listen, he was our opening day starter. There was more expectations for him. There wasn't a Starling Marte falling asleep in the outfield for him. I just think that he's a guy, and it's just happened more frequently with him, where I just don't have much patience anymore. And I think that, we talk about a Jose Budo, we talk about a David Peterson, a Joey Lucchesi. I'd rather see, obviously, Sprout. I'd rather see a young guy get an opportunity. I really think he's just blocking the young pitchers from having more of an impact than him. That I would like to see those guys pitch instead. It's gotten to that point. It's just happened too frequently. And again, I just don't see anything in the stuff where I'm like, okay, I could see a scenario where he's effective. I could see how this pitch and that would work. I don't see anything. I'm like, if you're just at 90 with no great movement or break, how are you fooling anybody? It's just there's no approach that I just don't see the scenario where he is successful.
He's always been able to tunnel fairly well as well. He has not been able to do that well this year. Hitters are just picking it up, and you're seeing it as the sequencing. I mean, hit after hit after hit after hit. He just can't get out of these jams. then he's also losing his control. It's just not been a good mixture at all for Jose Quintana this year. And the same thing goes with how we felt about Carlos Carrasco. Obviously, they're different pitchers.
Yep.
It just, he's getting into that territory of, why are you still here? Like, that's why. And listen, I understand, like, the pitching prospects weren't fully developed at that point with Carrasco here. Billy Epler's an idiot. But, if you're talking about in terms of, giving the young guys a gateway to play, Quintana's got to be the next one to go, because he doesn't have more the effective stuff, or the durable, not the durable arm, but more of like the more secure arm that Hauser can be out of the bullpen as compared to what Quintana can do. I mean, he's not going to fool anybody. With Quintana, he needs the pinpoint. Hauser, he just needs to make his pitches, and he's able to contact manage and maybe get some strikeouts with the extra velocity he's got right now. So as for me, I'm going to go with Shaman Naya. I also can put Marte, because that was kind of a working group there.
Yeah.
Pretty much opened the floodgates, but Minaya, it's pretty much the same thing with him. The high pitch count didn't let him go deep into the game, and it definitely costed him against a really talented Phillies lineup, which kind of sucks. Obviously, it led to a loss. Maybe we could have won that game in the margins, but again, relying on the bullpen to give you 5+ innings, it's really, really tough to sustain anything like that. And he needs to be better, obviously, and the same thing goes for Quintana. But I think I would cut the cord on Quintana. That's a different story there, because I know Minaya can be a really good pitcher. Quintana, he's on some of his last legs as of right now at age 35. I think he's about to turn 86. Yeah, he's going to turn 86, because, you gain 50 years when you're a Met. But other than that, I think we're going to wrap it up here going into the Marlins series. Now, I will say, for those of you listening, for those of you watching right now live, watching on playback, the next episode is not really in our pace, because the final game of the series will be on Thursday, but it will be at 7. So we may have to do maybe a solo show with me on Friday if Frank isn't able to be here, or maybe Andrew or something. We'll figure something out, but there is a somewhat of a possibility. Let's just say that we may skip it this week for that one, but I don't want to. But just so you know, guys, it's TBD for the next episode in terms of this upcoming Marlins series. In terms of going into this Marlins series, parting words, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, right now we talked about, okay, the 3 games back, where they have a lot of teams to jump, but the Mets have had a bad year, but the Marlins have been quite a bit worse. So I think that, this is one of those series that, like, if you are going to get any hope back in, you've got to do really well here. I mean, you've got to win these games. Obviously, sweep is ideal, but you have to win the series at minimum. Like, there's no discussion. Yes, jet lag, you're traveling, you'll have one rest day, whatever, but still, I feel like this is just a really big opportunity for the Mets that they've got to capitalize on.
Yeah, and then you face a Padres team that has really also been bleeding a little bit in the pitching department. It's a team that has some talent on it, but I'm just saying this is definitely a part of the schedule you can take advantage of. So, you're going to have some tough opponents, but right now you have a little bit more of a slight stretch where, maybe you could start winning some games here, stacking up some series wins, and, good teams. What sets good and bad teams apart is 2 out of 3 versus 1 out of 3. So, that's the
and we're going to see Jesus Luzardo again. So that's going to be a left-hander. Yeah. I think, we'll see that Iglesias Torrens lineup. And I think that'll be another good test of just to see, like, how much this lineup has improved, because we're going to have that different combination than we did the first matchup. So I am, like, again, that's if they're going to lose a game in the series, obviously that's the one you predict. Yeah. But I just want to see if, this improvement against left-handers has really improved.
And hopefully we can get some volume from Tyler McGill. Hope that can happen.
They have Luis Torrens listed as day-to-day on the apps.
Okay.
So,
Uh-oh.
because of a leg injury.
All right. Well,
we'll see. Maybe not. Maybe Tomas
I don't
Single's
know.
got to go back to carrying, and maybe we get some Joe
Maybe.
Hudson action. You never know.
Maybe Joe Hudson. I don't know. He was brought up here for a second, and then I think they sent him right back down. So, other than that, we're gonna wrap it up here. And again, once again, thank you guys for those of you who tuned in live. For those of you watching on playback, make sure to hit the like button. We don't say that enough. Hit the subscribe button. All that great stuff. All of our links are in the description. If you want to follow us individually, if you want to follow the show, we've got Frank's post games after every single game. Again, they get a little bit longer, but again, I'm letting them go. They're on our TikTok and they're on our Twitter after every single game, about like a half hour after. And as for the listening platforms, again, Mondays and Fridays at 9 a.m. After these are recorded. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Let's go Mets. Let's start to play better back in America. How about that? All right. We'll see you guys next time.